Hey guys, this is going to be my review of the second episode of the second series or season of His Dark Materials. So I will jump straight in with some spoiler talk. Again, I'm a bit frustrated with this episode, a bit like the first episode. Now, again, I should point out that the first series was a bit of a slow starter with me. But again, I have a similar issue this episode, and that is with the Will character, who I'm just not really convinced with, especially since now he's a more focused lead character, whereas in the first series he was introduced quite late on in the series, and obviously he didn't have as big a role as he's had so far this series. So I think so far the problems with the season mostly are with him. But also I do wonder if some of the fantasy elements which I'm not so keen on or which tend to turn me off from the genre, this kind of fantasy anyway, I think they're starting to sort of poke up and show themselves a bit more so far in series 2 than they did series 1. I think series 1 papered over them more because of the quality of the casting and the overall production, and because I was interested in the characters and their stories for the most part. And it was actually quite a dark at times series 1, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's still there's good moments in this episode. I'd still say it's a bit hit and miss. But there is some promise actually by the end, with a certain development with Miss Coulter, who of course is, along with Lila, probably my favourite character. But so in this episode, Will and Lyra decide to go to Oxford, as in Oxford in the real world, or Oxford on Earth, because they realised at the end of last episode that they're both from Oxford originally, and that might be some sort of link, and they can potentially maybe get some information about the dust from Oxford, from the resources available there. So we get some good stuff actually with Lyra going through the portal and in the real world as we know it, Earth, for the first time. And that's quite good, because obviously we come to realise, as we did in the first episode with Will and Lyra, that obviously he's used to certain things, and there's certain things that he experiences as part of human everyday life, which he's never experienced. And I think that's something obviously the book and this story is sort of using, really. It's probably one of the main reasons why they decided we can get Will and Lyra together as a pair of characters, because you can then have that contrast. So there's some good stuff actually with Lyra being freaked out by certain things as soon as she comes through the portal. She's freaked out by traffic, for example, because she's never experienced traffic, cars and stuff. But they're sort of separated for a lot of the episode actually as soon as they get there, which is sort of good news. There's a little bit about Lyra bringing up Will and the fact that she discovered through the device that he is a murderer, but kind of a good murderer, and he's edgy about that. He doesn't really want to talk about that. And there's a couple of scenes like that where she uses the device, and he's hesitant to really go along with it, but she uses it at one point to find out more about his family, and she reassures him that his father is still alive, which I think we kind of think he probably is, and that also that to do with his mother. But that's what the plot is with Will this episode, is that he's sort of keeping tabs on his mother, and he's also introduced to, he discovers that he actually has grandparents that he never knew about. And I think when he meets the grandparents, we quickly discover why he's never been told about them, because they are a bit sort of crooked. Now, the grandmother is perfectly nice to him and friendly, and you get the impression that she actually does want to be like a good like grandmother to him. But there's this stuff where obviously Will's on the run and the law's kind of sort of after him, and we sort of, again, it's getting into this stuff about the magisterium like having influence on the law and stuff, because the grandfather is like totally off with Will, and then as the grandmother's talking to him, like the grandfather goes in the other room and is like calling the law. And so it's stuff like this I'm not so keen on, and not just because I'm not that really interested in Will as a character, but I think just because it's another connection, another secret. You know, he has these grandparents, but they turn out not to be great like grandparents, and they have connections to the law, and the grandfather's like trying to turn Will in and stuff like that. It just feels like padding that we don't actually need. It doesn't seem to serve that much of a purpose with the story. So I did sort of zone out really every time Will was on screen in this episode. As I said, we'll see about his character. But Lyra, there's some good stuff. She goes to this museum. She's trying to find like a scholar basically, who's like an expert on dust. And she eventually does find her, and it's this character who sort of makes it her life worth to investigate like the science of dust and everything like that. But she obviously doesn't have the experience, or she doesn't have the knowledge about it that Lyra has been exposed to. So they sort of strike up a bond. Actually, what I quite like in this episode is, again, Lyra being very like guarded and smart and protecting herself, because at one point like the agent who works for like the magisterium, who's keeping tabs on them, he's following them and spots Lyra in the museum, and he obviously like he's undercover, he's trying to fish for information, he's trying to like win her over and stuff. And Lyra like actually is good. She uses like a code name that I can't remember what it is now, but she uses a different name. So that's another nice little touch, showing how smart Lyra is and how on her guard she is. But that's a good little scene as well. But Lyra, as I said, finally meets this academic, this professor who like is an expert on dust, and those scenes I do quite like. I think the actress playing the scholar is good. She's very sort of likable and kind of believable, sort of nerdy in a way. But those scenes I did like. What happens is Lyra introduces the academic introduces Lyra to like her research and this idea of dark matter basically controlling dust, and this idea then the dust can connect to the human brain cell basically and get inside their head. And I think this is something to do with what happened to Lyra's friend at the end of the last season. But so what happens is you can put on a headphone set, and basically your brain waves can control the dust and they can react to it. So it's almost like artificial intelligence in some sort of way. So this is obviously a mind-blowing scene for Lyra, and at one point she tries an experiment where she puts on like the head sort of set. It's like, you know, the electro type things to the head, and they kind of go wild and it's like this big sort of reaction where, because of Lyra's mind and her sort of intelligence and what she's experienced, like the reaction to them is like nothing sort of ever really. So some good stuff, and I think we might see this character again. At one point we see her talking to who I'm assuming is like her partner or husband, and he's another academic, and she's just like filling him in, sort of thing. Like Lizzie was all. I think it's Lizzie was like Lyra's sort of code name. Just saw it in my notes. The other plot of the episode is to do with the Magisterium, and some of this is hit and miss. Basically, it's the fallout from last week where the lead Magisterium guy has obviously been killed because of what happened with the witch, and there's a lot of like internal like struggles and debates over how they should approach it, whether they should like go after the witches and make that a priority. And Miss Coulter is like planting certain seeds of doubt, like playing them off against one another and kind of working her way into like a position of power. But you do get this court scene where you've got Arma Jardine, I'm not quite sure, but seen him in lots of things, who is basically like a representative of the witches. And he comes in and is questioned about the whole thing. And the whole idea is that they're trying to argue the case against witches, trying to say, well, they just use their powers for like evil, sort of thing, and trying to make the case that they should be expelled. But also then this guy who's like represents them is like, he's almost like an in-between the Magisterium and the witches. So it sort of does add some good mythology again, and some kind of like real world mythology. I think the way it works in real world politics to this fantasy setup, it is one of the strongest things about the story in the show. But it's a really good courtroom scene where he's like arguing his case sort of back and forth, and yeah, that's kind of the basis of the scene. But he's obviously trying to argue that 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 witches have their purpose in this world, and that there's no like grudge with them and the Magisterium. And I think his main argument is that it was just one witch who acted alone, which is completely true. She did go rogue. It was not a conspiracy with the other witches, but basically the Magisterium is a bit corrupt and doesn't really want to hear this. He's sort of made up his own mind, so he sentences this doctor character to like a sentence, basically. So I think that is actually the scene of the episode, and I really enjoyed when like the judge is getting like really pissed off. He's like, blasphemy, and slamming his fist down. It's really good sort of dramatic type scene. So I like that a fair bit, and it's kind of frustrating that then you don't see that much of Mrs. Coulter. She's in and out, but she's kind of like weaving these seeds of doubt, playing one off against the other, and kind of like planting this idea that, well, the aggression towards the witch is it like really justified, sort of thing. So every time Ruth Wilson is in the scene, it kind of like perks up. But yeah, some of the Magisterium stuff I can like take or leave, really. Some of it is a bit sort of bland and a bit, I think, just part of this sort of like story which I just don't really engage with. But then the courtroom scene was very well done. But anyway, the end of the episode, which I do like, because what basically happens is then, and this is going into like the more darker sort of territory, where they basically make this decision to attack the witches. So they basically drop explosives on the woodland, the area that the witches are based. And so at times this story does go quite dark, which I quite like. So we're getting almost into like terrorism type thing and real world stuff going on there. And again, the witches stuff I can take or leave, but I mean that's an interesting side to it. Some of the witches stuff I kind of don't care about. It just feels a bit dated, and we could do with them being used maybe for a one-off storyline. And I'm not sure if they need as big a part as they've had so far in this series, but that's obviously an interesting side to it with them now being attacked like this and the whole idea of terrorism in this world. But yeah, what happens at the end is that Mrs. Coulter actually leaves. Like she reveals that she has been playing them against each other, and that was part of her purpose. But sort of unexpected, because you thought maybe she wanted power in the Magisterium, but she actually has another mission now. She says that she's leaving, and that she has a place to be and a mission, and walks out. And I think that's what gives me hope, because actually, yeah, I sort of want her doing her own thing now, and a more focused plot with her, rather than her like bouncing off, the Magisterium and some of those characters who aren't as interesting to me. I kind of want Miss Coulter doing her own thing. So when she left at the end of the episode and there's a new mission for her, I was kind of excited. So there you have it. That's my thoughts on the second episode of His Dark Materials Season 2. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below if you've been watching along. How are you feeling about this series so far in comparison with the first series? And how is it shaping up compared to the books? But let me know your thoughts. Like and subscribe as well. You can also ding the bell on YouTube. Let you know when there's a new video live, and keep watching new TV and look out for more TV reviews. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.